Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr on a lovely, whichever day you're listening to this, a few days after Ohio State slipped by Michigan 62-39. I wonder, Tom, what is the over-under would be 2.5, and the question or the prop bet or whatever it is how many times on average our listeners have rewatched the game? Where are you, over or under that?
Over, not even a question. And I can guarantee, based on my Twitter replies and retweets and likes, I can guarantee that they are way over that on the Michigan radio call version of the highlights. Way, 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 way over. So, I mean, I don't think that was a big surprise that was a big hit, but yeah, it turns out Ohio State fans like to wallow in the sorrow of Michigan fans. Not a big surprise.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that, go check it out at theozone.net. Tom, what was the title of it?
Something like the most glorious 9 minutes of your week, something along those lines. And I mean, I advertised it on Twitter as the single greatest thing in the history of the universe, but I didn't want to like oversell it to people. So I kind of tamped down my verbiage a little bit there, just because I didn't want people to get too excited about it before clicking on the link. But I think it delivered.
Yeah, and how many people were upset that they felt like they got shorted? Anybody?
0.0. It was a crowd favorite. It was just probably 150 words of absolute nonsense. I think I talked about the Oregon Trail and antique cars and dysentery or something, and it just absolute nonsense. And I think it was the favorite thing that I have written from our audience in the last 2 years. So I don't know if that says more about me or about them, but whatever it is, it's fine. It's all good.
I was impressed with our Thursday and Friday shows last week. No other shows, just those two. The Thursday show was the Michigan Concerns. The Friday show was something like how Ohio State will win. And on Friday, we talked about the different things that needed to happen. Thursday, Michigan fans told us what they were worried about. And these two shows, basically, like The Simpsons, predicted the future. And if you play the shows backwards on your record player, you can hear us say 62-39. And that's pretty cool.
You can hear you say 62-39. You can hear me say, score one more touchdown. It will be a nice afternoon.
But they didn't. They decided to go with sportsmanship, which, kind of lame. You know what? Just throw another one in there. You know Jim Harbaugh would.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we talked last week. If Jim Harbaugh had a chance to run it up and go for too late, 100% he was going to do that. But we were talking during interviews with some other folks at Ohio State interviews on Tuesday night, and someone brought up, I guess there was a radio show in Michigan or something where they were talking about how it was so much more psychologically damaging to Michigan players and fans that Ohio State had hung 62 on them and then showed them mercy at the end of the game. Like, nope, we've dunked on you enough. We could score on you more. You know that we could score on you more, but we're not going to do it. We're just going to take a knee. And how much more damaging that was than if they had tried to punch it in and then, then they have something to be angry about for the next year. Just having beaten them mercilessly for 59.5 minutes, not feeling the need to score one more time, that was more psychologically damaging for Michigan.
It's like when Obi-Wan Kenobi left Anakin like cut in half on this inside, near the lava flow, and he could have put an end to him, but he's like, no, you know what? I'm just going to go. I've got some recruiting to do. And then Anakin is just sitting there. And, like you said, it messes them up psychologically. Look what happened to that dude. He went freaking crazy. All right. So just watch out, all of you people in the galaxy who, could fall under the power of Michigan football and the dark side.
I haven't seen the new Star Wars movie, so I don't think that was from one of the original three, so no, I don't know what you're talking about, but that's fine.
We talked every single day last week about the game, and I think we covered it pretty well from every single angle. One of the things we talked about was Michigan's offense is such that it will lend itself to Ohio State's defense, and it would maybe come down to how much Michigan went away from their own offense and went out, outside towards the sidelines, did some east-west stuff, and maybe borrowed from other teams. And they really didn't do much of that. And I've got a breakdown here where we basically said anytime you've got multiple tight ends, Ohio State will take that because you can only go so far with multiple tight ends. And on 36% of the snaps, Michigan had multiple tight ends. On, let's see, and they gained about 55 yards in that time. They limited themselves. They limited their explosiveness. And they played right into Ohio State's hands because, as we've seen, the more you go outside, the more you put the linebackers out in space and needing to defend wider patches of the field, they're going to be in trouble. Now, when Michigan went with just one tight end and one back, which was 58% of their snaps, they picked up 348 of their total yards, of which they had about a little over 400. So, like that 11 personnel, that one back, one tight end was about 80% of their yards, 90% of their yards even. And the fact that they were having success there, but Jim Harbaugh would still go back to, I need these two tight ends. I need Ben Mason in there for God knows what. And he just so stubbornly decided to be what Michigan offense was earlier in the year. And they limited, not only do they limit their receivers, they limit their running backs, they limit Shea Patterson. And Greg Schiano could not have been happier.
No, that was one of the things that the Michigan fans brought up on that Thursday show last week, that Harbaugh was going to be stubborn offensively and get away from what was working and want to just keep doing what he always wants to do and not do what works against this Ohio State defense. And that seems like what they kind of fell into at times, because they did move the ball. I mean, it wasn't like they didn't score. They put up 39 points, but they fell into kind of the more traditional north-south running game, which if you're playing a team with Tuff Borland at middle linebacker, Tuff Borland eats that up. That's the kind of game plan that just sets up the Ohio State defense for success. We saw it at Michigan State, and you see it again at Michigan. And then in between, you have the Maryland game, which is all sorts of motion and east-west, and you saw what that did to the Ohio State defense. And that was, it wasn't like Maryland was throwing the ball all over the yard. I think they completed 6 passes all day. They were able to run it because they were not just lining up I formation or just, in shotgun and just running straight up the middle. That is exactly how you get Ohio State to stop you this year. So that was the fear that Michigan fans had coming into that game, and that's exactly how it played out, it seemed.
And it's funny because Jim Harbaugh had built the confidence back up, and Michigan fans were believing in him. And yet there was still this little fear, like, we know him too well. We've seen him, go into this shell. And basically that's what happened. And so they had built him up, still had this fear, and he lets them down by doing what they were afraid he would do. And now they're left like, now what? You go back to the drawing board to try to top this program that just put 62 points on you and decided not to put 69 on you, trying to be nice, not nice. Anyway, they decided to take the knee. And there's such a wide, I guess, chasm between the two right now, when we thought that Michigan, or, this year, Michigan had overtaken them. Because we even said, many weeks on this show, like, this Ohio State team will not beat Michigan playing like this. Of course, they didn't play like that. They played like they had the potential to play. And not only did Michigan's offense set up Ohio State's defense, but Michigan's defense fell right into what Ohio State likes to do. But it all came down to the pass blocking and giving Dwayne Haskins time. You give him that much time, And I mean, we've seen him. We take for granted how accurate Dwayne Haskins is, because when he throws a pass that's off, it stands out. When any other quarterback in Ohio State history has been here, and they throw a pass that's a few yards off, you're just like, that happens. That's what quarterbacks do. When Dwayne Haskins does it, you're like, is he okay? Is he sick? Is he having problems at home? Is his girlfriend breaking up with him? Why is he slightly inaccurate on a timing pattern with pressure in his face and having to do all of this in 1.8 seconds? What's wrong? What's the problem? And it's amazing how accurate he can be with the time. And Michigan, I guess, is probably pretty impressed by now.
I would think so. I mean, you mentioned pressure in his face, and I assume you must have been talking about some previous game, because I don't recall seeing much pressure in his face at any point on Saturday. Michigan might have had a guy. They didn't sack him. I don't know. They might have hit him once or twice on pass attempts. I know they got him on a run where it should have been targeting, or at least a personal foul. But I don't think they hit him on a passing attempt, did they?
I heard somebody say they got him once on a throw, but he seemed to be okay to me. I don't think it was too much. It was. I don't remember a better offensive line performance, like maybe ever, in terms of just pass blocking, because of how important it was for this offensive line to hold up, and they stopped all the blitzes, and Dwayne Haskins pointed all of that out and got everybody in the right protections and was just a master. And if that's his last home game as a Buckeye, it's a memorable way to go out. 6 touchdown passes, 396 yards passing. Good luck topping that one next year, Tate Martell, but he probably will.
Probably will. I mean, yes, if you want to consider the single greatest offensive performance in the history of the school against the school's most bitter rival to clinch the division and send the opponent to a crushing season-ending defeat, if you want to consider that good, I mean, I guess that was a good performance. 396 yards and 6 touchdowns. That would have been, coming into the year, that would have been, the second highest passing total ever in Ohio State history, and tied the school record for passing touchdowns in a game, and you did it against the number 1 defense in the country. That was, as far as things go, that was okay. That was fine as far as performances go. But to get back to your central point, as impressive as Haskins was, that offensive line it exceeded expectations by leaps and bounds. I mean, I think we both came into that game thinking, if they can, block well enough to run the ball some, and if they can keep Haskins upright for most of the game, they have a chance. And then they run blocked great. They moved the ball on the ground. I mean, it wasn't 12 yards a carry or anything, but they consistently moved the ball on the ground when they needed to. And they kept Haskins clean. They gave Haskins a clean pocket all day. And that's a Michigan defensive line that's going to have some reasonably high NFL draft picks on there. And I don't know. I don't think we've gotten a real firm answer on exactly how healthy Winovich and Gary were in that game. And I don't know that we'll ever really know the answer to that. That may come out in next April during some NFL draft interview that, oh yeah, I was playing at 50%. But whatever, Michigan's coaches felt that those were their best options. And if those were their best options on the number 1 defense in the country, for the Ohio State offensive line to have held up that well is remarkable. That was one of the most impressive performances by an Ohio State offensive line relative to my expectation that I can remember ever.
Ever. Yeah. And every year after Ohio State beats Michigan, you have Michigan fans turning towards, why did this happen? And a lot of it is there's always some rationalization that you have to sell your soul to compete with Ohio State or Alabama or Clemson, and that Michigan's academics and their righteousness and they're doing it the correct way holds them back. And, that's always the way it's going to be because they do things the right way. And this is what Notre Dame fans have said for a long time. But, Tom, this is also the second time in 7 years that Notre Dame is going to be playing for a national title. So if Michigan is trying to use that excuse, maybe they might want to switch to like Duke or like Vanderbilt. Somebody more commensurate to their standing in football.
I was going to say, if you're going to go Duke, Vanderbilt, the next school in line there is Northwestern. But of course, as we know, Northwestern has made the Big Ten championship game, which is not something Michigan has done. So it's not a great comparison there. And I think the takeaway from Notre Dame potentially making the championship game / playoffs a couple times in the last 6-7 years is that Notre Dame must be secretly cheating or morally flawed in some way, because I mean, very consistently, when Michigan wins, it is because their players have higher character and are do things the right way and are superior, and their warrior poets are finer than any other school's heathen athletes that they roll out on the field. And when they lose, it's because the other school is cheating. And no Michigan player has ever been paid ever in the history of the universe. Just ask them. And yes, technically they were the home of the single biggest pay-to-play college basketball scandal in the history of the NCAA. But the football program on the same campus, which is much bigger, much more popular, that only happens, the biggest pay-for-play scandal in basketball history happened there, yes. But the much bigger, more popular football program, it's never happened there. So, and if you don't believe me, just ask them.
And so then they're also talking about Ohio State cares more about the game than Michigan does, and Michigan fans do, and that's another reason why Ohio State wins. But I'm looking at the something I've been doing on iTunes is looking at podcast numbers and checking to see where we are, and at any given day, there's like 10 different Michigan podcasts that are in like the top 100. So people care. Michigan fans care because this season they have blown up numbers. They, our own numbers from Michigan fans listening. Michigan Monday is always read by Michigan fans. They care, and they care a lot, and that's why it sucks for them when Ohio State beats them every year, and you get your hopes up, and they had their hopes up this year. There have been other years where they did not have their hopes up. They, Rich Rodriguez, how could you? The later years of Brady Hoke, why would you? Here with Jim Harbaugh, though, you think that the 2015 game, why wouldn't they? That's a home game. 2016, their hopes are up throughout the game. Last year at home, you were leading 14-0. You got that sucker in the bag, and it's just heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. And if you didn't care, it wouldn't hurt so much. And the fact that I see the pain from on Twitter, on comments and emails, they care, and maybe at this point they hate Tom. They hate that they care.
Well, yeah. I mean, if the argument is that they don't care, this is the girl you asked out in middle school, and she said no. It was like, no, I was just kidding. I didn't even care. Like, ha ha ha, it was a joke.
You're ugly.
Joke's on you. I don't care. Like, yeah, okay. I bet. Because that's not, at the end of their basketball game on the Friday night before the Ohio State-Michigan game, they definitely did not put Beat Ohio on the scoreboard. Their fans were not chanting Beat Ohio. They don't care. This is not a focus for them. They don't call it the game. They don't participate in documentaries about it. No. This is not anything that they care about. This is beneath them. They have their academics to worry about. They have their main rivalry with Michigan State. They have their secondary rivalry with Rutgers. I mean, this is the Ohio State game. This is just the dirty truck drivers down south. They care too much. They cheat, and therefore that's why they win. What other explanation could there be?
There couldn't be any other explanation. Tom, what was we got to talk about the best thing and the worst thing we saw. I'll go first. We already talked about it, so it won't take me long. The best thing I saw was the offensive line, the pass blocking. I was rewatching the game for Michigan Monday, and just watching the Ohio State offensive line and looking for, where did guys come from? Did anybody get close? Josh Uche, who is a linebacker who comes in on passing downs, is a quick guy who can get low, and I thought Thayer Munford and Isaiah Prince would have trouble with him. They had no trouble. He wasn't even in the stat book. I had to check the game participation to see if he even played, which he did. He just didn't do anything. Chase Winovich, Rashawn Gary were stifled the entire time. There was no interior stuff. The blitzes in the middle were stopped by the guards in the center. The twists, the stunts, Ohio State was flawless. Thayer Munford would start with one guy, see a twist coming around, go outside, somebody would pick up his man. It was like an orchestra. They knew every step to take or every note to play, a dancing orchestra. And it was perfection, basically. So that's the best thing I saw. Tom, you probably saw something better, I would assume, or maybe not.
Yeah, you stole the actual answer as we discussed earlier. So I'll talk about something else that was also pretty good. Frankly, there's a couple answers that came to mind as you were talking and stealing the actual answer. I mean, you can go with Chris Olave, and you can go with the linebackers and the defense in general. I mean, Olave is, for a true freshman to score 2 touchdowns in the first half of a top 10 game and you're against your big rival, end of the season, division championship on the line, for the coaches to trust him that much to be out there in that position is really telling. That is, they think that kid is going to be a big time player. And for them to then trust him also to be the guy that loops around and has the impossible. I mean, Urban Meyer talked on Monday about, or maybe it was Saturday, about how he did not think it was physically possible for someone to run fast enough to block a punt from where Chris Olave started. Urban used the word pissed to describe how angry he was when he heard them call that particular punt block, because he said there's no way they were going to get there. There's no way they're going to get there. And then he got there. So, I mean, you see the physical gift is there, the speed, the playmaking ability is there. He's met with the media a couple times and been very impressive and poised. The moment never seems too big for him. I mean, if you can go out there and score 2 touchdowns in the first half of a game where Ohio State's an underdog against a top 4 Michigan team, like the moment is not too big for you. I mean, I think there was some question like, what's going to be what's the leadership in that wide receiver room going to look like after Dixon and McLaurin and Paris Campbell and potentially KJ Hill all leave after this year. And I think they've got, in the same way that Mickey Marotti looked at those guys 4 years ago and said, this is the future of your program. I think there's a pretty good reason to think that people are looking at Chris Olave right now and going, yep, and they'll be just fine after the guys who've been the heart and soul of that offense for a couple of years. After they leave, it'll be fine. Chris Olave is still here.
I think it was after the game, Olave said that he was telling his teammates earlier in the week that he was going to have to lay out to block it. So not only do they entrust him to do this, he understands, like, to the very inch what is going to be required of him to block that. And we saw that field awareness on his second touchdown to curve around and come get the football. Tuesday night, Greg Schiano was asked about Urban being upset with that particular punt block. And basically what happened is the players came and told Schiano that the one punt block that they were going to use would not work because of how Michigan was blocking. Urban was not aware of that fact. And so when Greg Schiano decided to go with the other one that would work better, Urban was caught off guard a little bit. But that was a player's call. Like, what you are going to try will not work because how they are blocking. We have to do it the other way. And so that's what they did, and it worked. And it's interesting to get some insight like that. It's not just all coaches. There's feedback from the players. You have to have smart players, Michigan men, if you will, and players who understand every little thing about what they do. And that goes back to Chris Olave, knowing that I am going to have to dive for the ball. What's the worst thing you saw?
Well, before we get to the worst thing we saw, one point on diving for the ball when you are laying out for it like that, you are a little bit out of control. And that's when you can run into the punter and rough the kicker, and that's basically create a turnover in that kind of situation if you rough the punter. So I mean, to put him in a position where you're trusting him to have make the correct decision about launch angle and direction and all of that, and to not run into the kicker and basically create a turnover. That's a whole nother level of trust that, if he knew he was going to have to do that, for them to trust him to do that is pretty big as well. As far as the worst thing, 12 penalties, 150 yards. Some of them were kind of lousy calls. And when I say kind of lousy calls, I mean extraordinarily bad calls. But this team continues to put itself in spots where they are giving the opponent first downs. The pass interference calls, they're just some not great decision making at times, some false starts, that kind of stuff. It has just been a very consistent thread throughout the year. The Damon Arnett pass interference late in the first half that set up the first of those 2 Michigan touchdowns, that was not a pass interference that probably needed to be committed. I just think he just didn't trust himself on that play. If that pass is incomplete, Michigan's maybe kicking a field goal. I don't remember exactly where they were on the field. Maybe kicking a field goal, maybe going for it on 4th and long. Instead, you get that pass interference. It sets up the first touchdown. Then you have the turnover. It sets up the second touchdown. And all of a sudden, instead of 21-6, it's 21-19. So the penalties are something that will, when you play a team better than Michigan, the penalties are going to catch up with you. But
thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I think the worst thing that I saw was Malcolm Pridgeon's violent shove out of bounds that could have killed somebody after the play, and there is no place in that. And Chase Winovich was behind him, trying to hold him back from shoving a player out of bounds, but he went ahead and he put all of his might in there, and he shoved that player, not caring about his safety, not caring about his future, doesn't care if he wants to have kids, wants to have a family. In that moment, he didn't care, and there is no room in the sport for that. So Malcolm Pridgeon, you should be ashamed of yourself for that violent outburst and that terrible shove. You could have hurt the player. You could have hurt people on the sideline. If that's in the last 5 minutes, you could hurt me. So think about that next time. The other worst thing...
He's lucky he didn't get called for targeting. And if you haven't seen that play, by the way, and you're wondering what Gert is talking about, Pridgeon got called for, it was setting up to be a 3rd and 1, and Pridgeon got called for a personal foul for a late hit out of bounds or something, for pushing a Michigan player out of bounds. And then someone sent me a shot of the screen of the replay, and Chase Winovich actually pushes Pridgeon, which causes Pridgeon to fall into the Michigan player and push him. And so instead of 3rd and 1, they flagged Pridgeon for a complete nonsense penalty and pushed him back to 3rd and 16. Remember when I mentioned some of the really terrible, terrible, terrible calls? That was a real smooth transition by Gerd right there. Okay, Gerd, now what was the actual bad thing?
And if you look at the push, it's very, very soft. I mean, it's almost gentle in nature, like a caress. The pass interferences, I asked Greg Schiano if teams are actually causing those or trying to get those. It's like the new back shoulder fade. He said, no, it's just those are all legitimate penalties, he said, because there are things that the players are doing that they don't have to do. You do it for they're doing things too long or putting themselves in a position where they have to cheat. And the point that they're coaching is they want to get them out of those habits. And you shouldn't be in a position where you have to grab somebody's arm. You should just be in a position to knock the ball away. And so Schiano was not happy about that. And he basically says if it's called, it's pass interference, but he also agreed with each of the calls, which it seems like every single cornerback is taught to interfere in some ways, but he says they do not teach that, but they all do it. So it's kind of like, it's understood until it's caught. And so that was, for me, I'm with you. The penalties and the corners have to just clean clean it up, and especially if they move on past Northwestern, the competition is going to get tougher, and the skill position players are going to get better. So that was for me was the worst thing. The transition here, Tom. We mentioned in the past that we didn't really want to talk about the rumors about Urban Meyer's future, but on Monday he was asked about it again. And the way he answered it, and the question was from Rob Aller of the Dispatch, and Rob asked him basically, do you plan to coach next year? And actually it was, will you be coaching Ohio State next season? And Meyer's words were, I plan to coach. And then he went on answering a question about Northwestern, and and it's basically, I plan to coach, and our kickoff team is very good too, and they really understand it and contain and all those types of things. And that's what Urban Meyer does when he gets a question that he doesn't really want to ask. He starts talking about the opponent. It's one of his things. We laugh because we understand what it means by that. Listening to Julian Spielman on 105.7 The Zone on Tuesday morning, they were talking about how the reporters in the room were laughing and thinking that they were laughing at what a silly question from Rob, but that wasn't the case at all. It was just, it's always, you're laughing at the way he deflects it, and he does this not all of the time, but enough to where we know exactly what it means. But Tom, it's not a question that he has to deflect if he actually plans on coaching next year. And I know he says, I plan to coach, but then going into his thing where he doesn't want to talk about it anymore, why don't you want to talk about it? And that's the kind of answer that breathes life into the speculation.
Yes, it does. So anyway, about Northwestern's kickoff unit.
See?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't think the speculation is going to stop until people see him on the sidelines at the spring game and then next September or whatever against Florida Atlantic. Like, I think that a lot of people have decided that they know what's going to happen, and that's fine. And I think there's some reason to think that there's some validity to that, but they'll I guess we'll have to see and talk about Northwestern's kickoff unit more in the meanwhile, I guess.
Well, that's a great transition, Tom. Why don't we talk about Northwestern? They play Ohio State this week in the Big Ten Championship Game. Now, for the Michigan fans who are listening, the Big Ten Championship Game is a game that features the winners of the Big Ten East. Now, not all winners. I understand Michigan was a co-winner. When there's two co-winners, you go to a tiebreaker, and the tiebreaker is when one team has beaten the other. And so last week, if you remember, Ohio State beat Michigan 62-39. So that gave them the tiebreaker. And so Ohio State is the East champs. Northwestern is the Big Ten West champs. And what these two teams do then, they go to Indianapolis, which is a city in Indiana. It's the next state over from Ohio. It's kind of down and left from you. Okay? And they play in Indianapolis in a stadium, an indoor stadium. You guys, if you were to see it on TV or something like that, you would be blown away. There is a roof on the stadium, right? A roof on it. And you know what else? In this building, more than 4 bathrooms and more than 2 exits. I know, it's crazy. So what these two teams do then is they play a game of football, and the winner is the Big Ten champion. Now, the Big Ten champion then has a chance to go to the playoffs, and we won't get into the playoffs because there's no reason to talk to you about the playoffs and what that is. So, Northwestern. So, thank you for listening, Michigan fans. I understand this might be the last time you guys will be listening. So, please rate and review the show, if you will.
Don't do that after you listen to what Gert just said. Please don't rate. And
do not rate or review the show.
Ohio State fans only in our mentions, please.
Do not slide into our DMs.
See, the most confusing part of the whole Big Ten East and West champions going to Indianapolis is that Michigan's fight song claims "Hail, hail to Michigan, the champions of the West." Now, I realize that's not the division that they currently play in, and some may argue it's a reference to some bygone era 120 some odd years prior to now. But I don't buy it because, I mean, when was the last time you knew Michigan football fans to live in the past? I don't think there's any precedent for that. So I don't believe it. I think Michigan actually is the Big Ten West champions, and Ohio State will play them in Indianapolis this weekend.
That would be a surprise. And that, you know what, if Ohio State prepares for Northwestern and they show up and Michigan is there, they would probably be okay with that.
I mean, maybe they will be there. Maybe they won tickets from that Michigan radio station that was doing the contest for Big Ten Championship Game tickets. So maybe, if Jim Harbaugh won tickets, maybe he will be there.
You know what? They had hotels booked. You might as well use them. You know what? Go see the big city. See what it's like.
Since Jim Harbaugh played for the Colts, there actually is a picture of Jim Harbaugh in the press box. I look forward to tweeting it out on Saturday with. Why don't you listeners come up with good suggestions on a good caption for the picture of Jim Harbaugh in the press box at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis for the Big Ten Championship game? Just put those in the comments on the post for this podcast on the Ozone site, and I'll use the best one and credit the winner on Saturday.
Or also follow Tom Orr at Tom Orr4. And just live in his mentions and give him all the crazy ideas that you got. That will also work.
That also will work, yes.
So Ohio State comes into this game averaging 43 points a game. Northwestern comes in averaging 23.7 points per game, which is considerably less. Defensively, I don't know that you really need to get into defense. Ohio State is giving up 25.8, Northwestern 21.7. So while Northwestern has this reputation for being decent defensively, they're not great, and they're not great on offense. The story of their season is that they've been just good enough. And an 8-point win against Illinois, a 10-point win against Minnesota. This is in the last 2 weeks, where Pat Fitzgerald said on Monday's teleconference that he had his coordinators dial things back, play fewer guys, or rather get guys out to keep them fresh. So he spent these last 2 weeks, because Northwestern has had things wrapped up for the last 2 weeks. He took things easy and just believed that they had enough to win at Minnesota, which is pretty ballsy. And they did 24-14, and then home against Illinois, 24-16. Illinois giving up 45 points per game, and Northwestern basically did half of that, which is, I guess, good news for Ohio State. Iowa, they won 14-10. There's the most they've scored this season is 34 points. And that was in a 39-34 loss to Akron and a 34-31 win over Nebraska. They've won, 7 straight Big Ten games, and I think Tom, like 14 of 15. So they somehow manage, but maybe that's because they are living life in the Big Ten West.
That certainly doesn't hurt. Living life in the Big Ten West in a year when Wisconsin is not capital W Wisconsin, it goes a long way towards helping you get there. They beat Wisconsin at home. The win at Iowa might be their most impressive win this year. That was a heck of a game. As Ohio State has shown, it's not that easy to win at Iowa. So that was a pretty good win. Northwestern is one of those teams that they never look great. Like, they're never just a real. I mean, unless you go back to like the early 2000s, some of those Randy Walker teams, you never really think of Northwestern as a team that is like a fun, exciting, high-flying offense and score lots of points. They just kind of can drag you down and make you play at their level and keep it close, not let you pull away, and sometimes they can pull it out in the end. That's kind of their recipe against better teams. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And this year, on defense, they're fine. They're a little ahead of Ohio State in the advanced metrics on defense. But the one place they do have a big advantage is Ohio State's 121st against explosive plays, and Northwestern's like 41st. So you're going to have to kind of go down the field, march down the field probably. Maybe Ohio State can hit some big plays just because their skill talent is so much better than the Northwestern defensive backs. You know, the speed is just, there's a big speed advantage for Ohio State with guys like Paris Campbell that just are not a good matchup for Northwestern. But yeah, the Northwestern offense is not great. They're 108th in the country in S&P Plus, 88th in success rate, 117th in explosiveness, 122nd in rushing, 80th in passing. Like, there's nothing there that's like, this team is going to score 40 points against Ohio State. But if the defense can keep them in the game, maybe you force a turnover, score on a short field, I would not expect Ohio State to blow this team out. I think Ohio State probably wins, but I think it's one of those games that Ohio State fans will feel a little unsatisfied with.
Northwestern has five pass plays of over 40 yards this year. Compare that to Purdue with 18, Ohio State with 12. So they have an offense that, while they will spread things out a bit, isn't nearly as dynamic as offenses that Ohio State has faced in the past. Northwestern has lost 3 Big Ten games in the last 2 years. 2 of them have been to teams in the Big Ten East. This could conceivably be the third of that group.
If you're looking for something to feel terrified about, when we talked to Michael Jordan on Tuesday night, I asked him, so like, which defensively, and just in terms of scheme and personnel, which Big Ten team that you guys have played does this remind you of the most? And he thought for a minute. He said, Iowa. Oh no. And I said, why? And he said they're just relentless. They just go. They are absolutely relentless. They never stop. And he said that's something that I think a lot of people talk about. Oh, this team really plays hard, but the Northwestern and Iowa are 2 that like really do it, and they're he didn't say this, but I think they end up better than the sum of their parts because of that, because they are pretty relentless, and they're not, you're not going to get cheap, easy touchdowns against them. You're going to have to earn it every time. So if you want something to worry about, the team that Ohio State's about to play reminds Michael Jordan most of Iowa. So I'm sure that's not a team Ohio State will have a problem with. So it should be fine.
It'll be fine. And that's a perfect segue into the playoff talks, which we know will be important because Ohio State is definitely going to beat Northwestern. On Tuesday morning, I was driving in the car, driving around. Sometimes I just like to drive around because I got nothing to do and it's cold out and I like the cold. Herb Street was on Sirius XM saying, like, they were talking about every day on the radio on the college football channel. They talk about scenarios because that's what people want to call and talk about. And one scenario that he mentioned was Georgia losing and then staying at 4 and being in the playoffs. And he was saying, like, well, why should they be penalized? Why should you drop them down for losing to the best team in the nation? They should have some consideration for being at 4. And then my head exploded, and so I had to stop the car. I had the ice scraper. It does not do great with brains on the inside of the windows, but I was able to see my way home to tweet about it.
If the movie Pulp Fiction has taught us anything, you should have called the wolf.
That's true. So if Georgia loses, now imagine Georgia has already lost to Alabama. If they were to lose to LSU this week or last week by 20, we wouldn't be talking about them being a playoff team. And earlier in the season, they did lose to LSU by 20. I am so tired of the allowing Alabama to, first of all, and we could also get into the fact that if Alabama loses, people are like, so, well, it doesn't mean anything. We still know they're the best team. Losses have to hurt you at some point. Losing to Alabama, I didn't realize was now like the same as beating, say, Oklahoma. You know, it's if you lose close, I mean, gosh, you know, that's like the best day of your life. You lost close to Alabama, who is the best team in the world, whose best win this year is, I don't know, Mississippi State ish, something like that. And Alabama's the number one team in the nation. I don't have a problem with that. They're blowing everybody out. If they lose this week, there should be something that they should have to pay for that. They should be punished for that. Forgiving them for everything every year is how you get a dynasty. And last year, they got in because Ohio State had a second loss. There are no second losses around right now that would allow Alabama to slip in with a loss. And we have to talk about Alabama possibly losing now because it's not going to happen. But I'm tired of Alabama having free reign and not having any consequences for stumbling like other teams do. And when they do lose, it's like, well, we still know they're the best because I've been saying they're the best, and I don't like being wrong about things. So that's where I am with that.
Yeah, I mean, what possible cause would you have to think that you had been wrong about anything? That's not possible. That's not how the world works. You're right about everything, and everything that just, you know, goes against your preconceived notions is just you know, flawed data in some way and shouldn't count.
Right.
So the actual answer to this thing is sometimes when people go on sports radio, they just have to talk about stuff and they have to say stuff they don't believe. And so I think that's probably the actual answer here. But the answer to the criteria question for how is the college football playoff committee actually going to determine who gets this, conference champions are supposed to be weighed as, you know, get additional weight as compared to teams that did not win a conference championship. So assuming that Alabama wins and Oklahoma wins and Ohio State wins on Saturday, then Oklahoma and Ohio State would both be conference champions and would both have additional wins on their record, and Georgia would have a loss on their record and no conference championship. So I really cannot envision a scenario where that happens, especially to put two SEC teams in for the second straight year. I mean, I think the college football playoff committee is real stupid, like immensely stupid, but I don't think they're that stupid. I think there would be a significant enough backlash to that they know they can't do that. And just based on their criteria, they shouldn't do that. Now, if Ohio State loses and Oklahoma loses, I guess, and Alabama and Georgia go to triple overtime and play an absolute classic, yeah, maybe, I guess. Like, I don't know who else they would put in at that point, but I don't see that happening where Oklahoma or Ohio State wins and Georgia gets in over them with a loss.
It is pretty crazy that we are talking about this because we haven't talked about the playoffs at all because there's been no reason to. And when we have talked about it, we have said, yeah, don't worry about it. It's not going to happen. But things then begin to happen where now it is a possibility again. What Ohio State does against Northwestern, what Oklahoma does against Texas goes beyond just winning. It's how they win. And I don't think if they beat Northwestern like they beat Wisconsin last year, which is they get out early and then they hold on, that's not going to be good enough. I don't think they have to do 59-0. I think they need to be in complete control or, you know, game control for, you know, 3 quarters or whatever. Just easily the better team. And then, you know, Oklahoma is going to do what they do and they'll be in a shootout. Ohio State may have to pour things on a little bit because Oklahoma, they don't necessarily look at how many points Oklahoma's given up because as we've talked about in the past, like, you know, the Big 12, that's just how it is. You know, that's just how it is. That's just how it is. You know, they give up points. That's what you do there. So it's acceptable. When you do it in the Big 10, it's bad. And I think it's bad anywhere. But also, I think in the Big 10, it's worse because you're giving up, you know, 50 points to teams that go score 3 the next week or something like that. But I don't think the performance they had last year will be good enough. And I don't know what you know, 3 touchdowns. Urban has said that they don't think about that. But Tom, if they get up they might want to think about it. I'm sure they're not thinking about it when they're trying to win, but if they're up by 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, they might want a fourth.
Yeah, I don't think extra points on Saturday are going to hurt your case in any way, so you might as well try and score them. Because Northwestern is not, this is not Michigan where you're going to be a little bit merciful and not give them something to be ticked off for the next year. Go ahead and score as many points as you can score. If Oklahoma beats Texas, with Oklahoma already being ahead of Ohio State, I don't know how many points, even if Oklahoma wins by 2, and it's, the reversal of whatever the first game was, 48-46 or whatever the first game was, and they just win by 2. I think there's a decent chance the committee just puts in Oklahoma ahead of Ohio State anyway, just based on the fact that they avenged their first loss and it's a higher ranked team, and then you've beaten every team you've played during the course of the year, and yada yada yada. I mean, there's all sorts of rationalizations you can give there. I don't know if there is a point. If Oklahoma wins, I don't know what the point is where Ohio State leaps them based on how great they look. I don't know if 28-0 does that. I don't know if 42-14 does that. I don't know if 56-10 does that. I don't know. And my sense is that Northwestern will, just because of the way they play, be able to keep it close-ish enough that it won't get to the 56-10 kind of point. Because, I mean, based on, like, if Oklahoma wins, like you said, there has been no inclination from the committee to really penalize Oklahoma for having a crappy defense this year. That's just that the committee treats the Big 12 like the old whose line is it anyway? Everything's made up and the points don't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. If they win, and everyone scores 50, so it doesn't matter if you give up 50 because that's just how it is. And, that's fine. That's Oklahoma. If they want to go on best win, Ohio State has the best win. If they want to go on who has the worst loss, Ohio State has the worst loss. So they can judge based on whatever criteria they see fit and rationalize either choice, really, if they want to. But based on the fact that Oklahoma has very consistently been ahead of Ohio State and is still ahead of Ohio State even after that Michigan performance, not that this committee has ever been bound by precedent in any way, because clearly they haven't. The rules just change whenever they want them to. But if we're going to pretend that the committee is bound at all by precedent, I think that if Oklahoma wins and Ohio State wins, I would expect Oklahoma to go through to the playoff almost regardless of what Ohio State does. If Ohio State does another 59-0, yeah, absolutely, we can. I think it's a legitimate conversation, and they probably get in. But I don't expect that to happen on Saturday.
So Ohio State Urban Meyer needs to beat Northwestern like Jim Tressel used to, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I would wear a sweater vest, really, really do it up, do the whole thing, be very stoic on the sidelines, wear a sweater vest. Oh man, people would go insane. Now I really want that to happen. Now that's all I care about this weekend.
Yeah, I'm torn on this because if it's a beauty contest, and it pretty much is, like, Ohio State might win the swimsuit competition, but like they've got like maybe a bowling ball sized dent in their head, so they're certainly not flawless, and it's hard to look past that big dent that you got from Purdue. And just like last year, don't lose to Iowa, don't lose a second game, don't get blown out to by an unranked team. And if they don't make it, I can't blame the committee, because I wouldn't mind watching Kyler Murray against Alabama. You think that's the kind of guy who can give them trouble by keeping plays alive with his feet. So, I don't know how it's gonna. I don't have a feeling one way or the other where I would be leaning if things were close or if scores were similar for both games. But since they are where they are right now, what makes us think that they would change unless Ohio State has a significantly more stylish win than Oklahoma. Because right now, they have their places, and everything is set. And unless something changes, there's no reason to switch things around. So I guess you're right, Tom. Ohio State's going to the Rose Bowl, which will send Michigan to the Capital One Bowl. Is that what it is now? Still?
Oh, man. If they go to the Capital One Bowl, that would be. They won't. They will absolutely have to. They have to end up somewhere in the New Year's Six, I would think. Like they'll go to the Peach Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl or something. But Michigan losing the Peach Bowl to a Mackenzie Milton-less UCF team would be a pretty hilarious end to the season too. To your point about the blowout to Purdue, if that Purdue game ends with 4 minutes left and it's 35-20 Purdue, it's a whole different conversation. But it was 35-20, and then that you had the pass to Rondale Moore, who just atrocious tackling by the Ohio State defense, and looked like people kind of stopped playing a little bit on that play. And so he scores a touchdown. And then you have the Dwayne Haskins pick six, and all of a sudden, instead of 35-20, it's 49-20. And instead of, they lost by 2 touchdowns, but, the total yardage was pretty much the same, and Ohio State had a bunch more first downs, and it was just kind of a fluky game. All of a sudden, it's, Ohio State got blown out again. So those last couple touchdowns, they didn't necessarily matter in terms of the outcome of the game, but in terms of the perception, that has the potential to make a really big difference. And at the time, I said this won't necessarily keep them out of the playoff, but that presumed, they're going to snap out of it now and just get back to thumping skulls for the rest of the season. And they did, they beat Nebraska by 5. They won at Michigan State, but didn't do it looking real pretty. They looked like they looked at Maryland. If they had played like they played against Michigan for the 4 games after the Purdue game, I don't think that Purdue game holds them back the way it has. But the Nebraska game happened. The Maryland game happened. The Indiana and Minnesota games earlier this year happened. If those are 4 blowouts, I think you get a lot more grace from the committee than you did, even for the Purdue loss. But you can choose one blowout loss or a bunch of close, unimpressive wins, but you can't pick both.
I was thinking about this today. Ohio State 2006 wins 42-39 over Michigan, and then they go and get blown out against Florida, and you look back, and people then said, well, we should have known. They gave up 39 points. Look at we should have known the defense wasn't as good as we thought. Today, this week, they give up 39 points to Michigan, and people are talking about how well the defense played. And I'm wondering if, they go to whatever bowl, they say they make the playoffs and they get blown out, we'll look back and be like, well, yeah, they've given up a crap ton of points every time, and 39 points to a Michigan offense that didn't really try to score on them. So we should have known. So we'll see what happens on Sunday at noon, I believe, is when the show starts. So tune in. But before that, we'll have a Big Ten championship game reaction show for you. Tom, anything else before we get to listener questions?
No, I think we're pretty much good. I'm sure people are tired of hearing about the Michigan game anyway, so we can just move on. First question from @PoisonLenny, Lenny with 2 Y's on the end. Why is Meyer pushing the Martell packages now that Haskins has shown he can run well enough? OSU scores 70 without that nonsense. I'm not sure Poison Lenny has listened to this show and is aware of our editorial stance on Tate Martell.
Yeah. Delete this question. Urban Meyer said on Monday that he wants Tate Martell on the field. He likes him. He wants him out there. There seemed to be some missed opportunities by Martell where I don't know if he made the wrong reads, if they were in fact reads, because he could have walked into the end zone on a couple of his handoffs. Maybe it's just a matter of him getting more comfortable out there. But Meyer wants him out there. I don't know that necessarily Dwayne does anymore, but he's kind of He hasn't really been asked about it, but I don't expect him to stop being out there. Do you?
No, I mean, based on what Urban said, I don't expect it.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't think that the Martell packages are a waste of time. I think they probably haven't been using them correctly. I didn't agree with how they deployed him in the second half against Michigan, where he was out there for 3 plays in a row on the goal line. Like, there's just, if you're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again, it's not that. You have to vary it a little bit. You have to. He has to throw a pass. He did have one where he just flat. I think if it was a read, he made the wrong read and he handed it off, and he could have walked in the end zone if he'd held it or kept it. So I think they have to do some different stuff with that. But I mean, Haskins a couple weeks ago, someone asked him, "Is it a little frustrating to come off the field for Tate in the red zone?" And he said, he admitted it is kind of frustrating. And Martell has in the past said it's kind of frustrating to be stuck on the bench. He didn't come here to sit on the bench. So I think they want to make sure Martell plays enough that he's happy. You don't want him to get frustrated and leave. But more importantly, and I think the actual reason for this is you don't want Haskins taking too many shots, because if you're running in the goal line, like they'll run him, but they don't want him taking 20 carries or 18 carries like JT Barrett used to. You don't want him taking shots, because if he gets drilled at some point and you lose him, that really changes his offense to a degree that I don't know that they could overcome. Not that Martell couldn't lead them to a great season, but the offense at this point is what the offense is, and it's kind of tailored to Haskins, and it would be a pretty dramatic change to go to an offense more tailored to Martell.
Right, and you don't want to be scoring 65 points a game this time of year anyway. It's just too much.
Wouldn't be very sportsmanlike. Next one from @Miami Buckeye. In the 16 final rankings, OSU dropped from 2 to 3 because they didn't play in the conference title game. If OSU wins the Big Ten convincingly and gets in, they will have 2 common opponents with Notre Dame, winning both more impressively. Would that, plus a conference title, plus a 13th game, warrant being seeded ahead of Notre Dame? And I just would like to say for the record that there would be nothing on earth that would give me more joy than the committee to stand up on Sunday and whoever the 4 teams are that are in, say Notre Dame is 5th, but because they got docked points because they didn't play in a conference championship game. Like, there's nothing on earth that would give me more joy than that. But I don't think there's a chance in heck that actually happens.
I'm with you. It would be amazing. You could probably hear cheers out in the streets, basically from that happening. I guess it was 538 said that they came out with their numbers, and as we know, they're always correct. Came out and had OSU and Oklahoma ahead of Notre Dame's chances of making the playoffs. And I was talking to somebody else on Tuesday, saying basically the same thing. Am I crazy to think that Ohio State, if they get in, could jump Notre Dame? And I wasn't even thinking, completely forgot about the Northwestern game, just based on the way they beat Michigan, the way they have a conference title, because they would have as many wins as Notre Dame, but they would also have the added conference championship. They would have the added, the common opponent. I don't think it's outrageous. I think I don't think it would be inappropriate either. But man, if they held Notre Dame out for going 12-0, it wouldn't even matter who else was in the playoffs. This is the best playoffs ever. Don't change anything ever again. This is just amazing.
Finally, the system works. I do. I do think there's a little bit of false precision to those 538 numbers, because it's like, you change a thing and it goes, oh, well, this changes their percentage of making the playoff from 61% to 66%. It's like, yeah, okay, that's fine, but all of your criteria for calculating those numbers is based on assuming the committee treats the precedent as binding, then this is what it means, which we have established that the committee doesn't treat precedent as binding and takes every year basically as whatever they want to do, they're going to do. So I don't put a ton of stock in those numbers for that reason, but I mean, I guess I could see Notre Dame if Oklahoma really just flays Texas on Saturday, I could see Oklahoma jumping Notre Dame maybe from 4-3. I could see that happening maybe. I don't think Ohio State can jump from 6 over Texas, over Georgia, and over Notre Dame. I don't think I see that happening. Like, I don't know how much Ohio State could beat Northwestern by. I mean, that's another common opponent with Notre Dame, obviously. But even if Georgia loses by a trillion and Oklahoma loses, I still don't know. I mean, unless Ohio State really just drubs Northwestern, and I mean, I'm talking like a 59-0. I guess maybe then, but I don't really view that as a particularly realistic scenario, and I don't think any of the realistic scenarios end up with Ohio State ahead of Notre Dame. But I've been wrong in the past once or twice. Next one from @Zadaya. How much of the improved linebacker play was not being so close to the line versus Michigan not having speed guys like Purdue, Maryland, and Nebraska?
I think it's all of that. Like they say, it's all of it when they're not playing well. It's all of it when they're playing well. And Michigan, anytime they had more tight ends and fullbacks on the field, more backs, it was a good thing. Greg Schiano said Tuesday night when Michigan was in 2 tight end sets, that allowed them to be more aggressive because they knew they could only do so much with those guys. So it allowed Ohio State to do different things that they are more comfortable with. And they're not being spread out by these tight ends. Pete Werner had some nice coverage a couple of times on tight ends, and it's better. You saw what happened when he got matched up with Chris Evans on a slant in the slot, and I think they only really did that once. And it's I'm always amazed when people don't attack Werner more with the slots that he gets matched up with. But of course, the entire game was me wondering, why isn't Michigan doing this? Why aren't they doing that? Not having Rondale Moore, Tom, that's always going to help the defense.
Yeah, for sure. That just personnel-wise, Michigan is a better matchup for Ohio State, especially with the game plan they rolled out on Saturday. I talked to Davon Hamilton on Tuesday night and asked him, like, what was the difference with the defense against Michigan versus against Maryland? Because it was like a 1 week gap, and you're playing what is statistically a far better offense against Michigan than against Maryland. And on a yards per play, points, like whatever basis you want to use, it was night and day. Like they got infinitely better against Michigan than they did against Maryland. And he said, honestly, it was just like focus. They were better prepared. They were better focused. They were better everything. Just more ready. Guys were more disciplined, more staying to their assignments, doing their jobs basically. So that's a lot of it. But Michigan's game plan, absolutely, and Michigan's personnel and just their general approach to offense plays into this Ohio State defense much more. Because you're right, if you put Chris Evans out wide on Pete Werner, that is not a matchup Ohio State wants. But they did it once on like a 3rd and 7. He beat him on a slant. We looked at each other and went, "Oh, that's going to be there all day," and then they never went back to it. Like, why would you not? I mean, this is not like a video game where you can just run the same play over and over again like 15 times to just go right down the field. But you know you can get them in that matchup. Why would you not go back to that again and again and again? I don't. That seemed just straight bizarre to me because it was 7 yards and it got him a first down. But if he had just gotten away from the tackle, it was going to be a whole lot more than 7 or 8 yards. So yeah, there was. It was a very, very strange game plan for Michigan, and you could see why Michigan fans came in worried that Harbaugh was not going to do what he needed to do schematically because they just flat out didn't do it.
Yeah, and Chris Evans is one of their top 5 playmakers. He's an explosive running back who has skills. I think Ohio State offered him as a corner, so he's dynamic and he's a big play guy. And I'm just continue to be baffled in almost everything that Michigan did.
Yep. All right, next one from @TylerFeeney1. What kind of performance is more likely Saturday night? Michigan-like or every other Big Ten game-like? The offense seems to be clicking, and the defense looked like it had a heartbeat. But was it a one-time thing, or was that game the 18 version of the Wisconsin game in 14?
I That's. I think they're going to be better, look better than they did against like Michigan State. I don't think they'll be Michigan like. Northwestern plays a different defense. They do a lot more zone, so it's going to be a different Ohio State offensive attack. But as you said, Devon Hamilton saying that Ohio State was more focused against Michigan. Will they get that focused again this week? I don't know that it's possible. They'll be focused. It's a Big Ten championship game, but I somewhere in the middle between Michigan and their typical, say like Minnesota 30-14 or whatever that was. But like you said, like Northwestern just drags you down with them. They're messy, they're tough, they're smart, they don't make mistakes. I think they're the fewest penalties in the Big Ten. They're just a solid, stinky team, and they get to stink on you.
Yeah, I don't expect another big 66-point game on Saturday. I think Ohio State should win, but I think, like you said, like a 30-14, like that wouldn't surprise me at all. Just you win by a couple touchdowns. You're the Big Ten champions, and everyone kind of goes, "Yeah, that was good, but it could have been better." Like that's just the kind of game that Northwestern just sucks you into. It seems like every time whoever plays them, it's always like that.
Yeah.
Next one from @RenleyJenk. How big of a loss will Demetrius Knox be? And just for if you haven't been paying attention since the end of the Michigan game, he went down right at the end of the Michigan game and has Liz Frank, I don't remember how you pronounce it, fracture in his foot, and he's out. It looks like apparently out for the season, which would be his career. So I think Urban has been talking for weeks about the fact that Wyatt Davis is ready to go and ready to contribute on the offensive line. And I don't think it's a big step down just skill-wise there. I think just in terms of production, I think there's a decent chance that he's at least a lateral move from Knox. But the big question is, the offensive line has to play together. They have to work together as a unit. They have to gel together. They have to be used to working with each other. They have to, there has to almost be like the silent communication where you just know what everyone else is going to do. And that offensive line has worked together all season. And Tuesday night, Michael Jordan said, someone asked, so do you guys rotate in guys like Wyatt Davis in practice and just let them at least start working with you? Start getting some reps with you. And he said, no, they really just work, the ones, they work the twos. But they know that he'll be ready and he'll be ready to go. But for a unit that has to work together as well as the offensive line does, there's always a little bit of concern with a first-time starter stepping in. If he had been playing for a couple weeks, I don't think there'd be much concern at all. But just as a first-time starter, it's something that at least bears watching. But skill-wise, I don't think that's going to be a huge drop-off. How about you?
Ryan Day said on Tuesday that he was surprised looking back at the film at how much Wyatt Davis played against Michigan because he was in there on some goal line packages. So he's played there. He's played as the extra tight end before. So I really think like the loss of Knox is big. I would compare it to maybe like the loss of Isaiah Pryor, basically. I think I expect Wyatt Davis to play well, if not play better, and we've seen it with Chris Olave stepping in and Brendan White stepping in for Isaiah Pryor when he went down, and Jordan Fuller had his suspension for targeting. This just seems to follow the line, and you can already, Tom, this is a story that should already probably be written like after his performance against Northwestern. Another guy, young guy comes in, first or second year guy comes in and is like this gem that Ohio State wouldn't have played unless somebody had gotten hurt.
Well, in my prediction for the Michigan game, and please don't read any of it other than this one line, I talked about the fact that there were personnel changes that probably needed to be made at some point during the season that weren't made, and that, at some point Ohio State was going to pay for it. I may have thought it was last Saturday. I don't remember. It's not. I'm not here to talk about the past. But that is, the offensive line is one of those places where it's like, I bet some of the younger guys might be better at this point. Like if Urban is talking about guys being close, then younger guys are going to have be on kind of a steeper learning curve. Like at the point at which you're in the program for a fifth year, you kind of are what you are at that point. Like you're not going to make just all of a sudden like the switch is going to flip. That just generally is not how it works. Younger guys, the first couple times you get on the field, like there's a chance that it kind of takes off. So if you're close already, there's a decent chance that playing a younger guy could end up with a better product a week or two down the line. So I think there's a case to be made that Wyatt Davis should have been playing at one of the guard positions, not necessarily Knox, but one of the guard positions. I don't think either of those has been particularly a strength this year. So, yeah, I think there's a chance that this ends up working out pretty well for Ohio State long term, that Davis gets the Big Ten championship game, gets that month of bowl practice. That really gives him a head start for 2019 because both Knox and Pridgeon are gone after this year. So I think that there's that is something that could pay off pretty well for Ohio State down the line. Next one from @eBronstein. Is Northwestern a bad matchup? They can't match up athletically, but this team has shown they cannot stop spread teams. Despite the performance against Michigan, I still think the defense is a major problem. Michigan State and Michigan just happen to play right into our hands.
I agree with the last part. I don't know that Northwestern is explosive enough to do what Maryland or Purdue did. Like there's no Anthony McFarland. Isaiah Bowser is their freshman running back who came on when Jeremy Larkin had to retire from football, and Bowser has done well. I think he's more of a between the tackles guy. There is no Rondale Moore anywhere else, probably in college football. They've got guys who are good, but there's no. I think the best scenario for Ohio State is there's no guy who is going to catch it and go 60. And that was one of the things that Pat Fitzgerald was talking about was Ohio State, everybody has the ability to catch a hitch and take it to the house. Northwestern doesn't have that. They're going to have to go like station to station. It's not dink and dunk, but they're going to have to get their yards legitimately and not necessarily in big chunks. Now, does that mean we've seen that teams can do that because Ohio State's coverage can be lacking at times. So I think Northwestern can move the ball. I just think they're going to have to move it in a way differently than Anthony McFarland going 80 yards or Rondale Moore, picking up 40 here, 30 there, 25 there. They're going to have to work harder. But you know what? They'll also work smarter because they're essentially like the Michigan of the West.
Kind of, except they're playing in Indianapolis. So it's not a perfect comparison.
Right. I keep forgetting that part.
You talked, while you were talking, I pulled up Isaiah Bowser's stats for the season, just game by game. His average yards per carry against Rutgers, 4.5, against Wisconsin, 3.4, Notre Dame, 4.0, Iowa, 5.3, Minnesota, 2.9, Northwestern, against Illinois, 9.2, but that's North Illinois, so I don't think that really counts. So even with that huge game against Illinois, he's still only at 4.6 yards per carry. Like this is not a home run back. Ohio State, I think if they're rushing for 4 yards per carry, I don't think that's something that Ohio State's going to be too worried about. When you see the opposing backs getting in that 5.5 yards per carry, that's when it's concerned. And when it's bigger than that, like Anthony McFarland going for, I don't remember what it was, 14 or something like that. Like, yeah, that's a problem. Don't do that again. But I think that Northwestern does a lot of the things that have hurt Ohio State, but doesn't have the players to really make it hurt. It's like they can hit Ohio State, but it's not going to hurt nearly as badly as it did against Purdue or Maryland because they just don't have the guys that can punch as hard.
Bowser had 2 carries in the first half of the season, is averaging over 25 carries per game the last 6 games. So he's more of a volume guy, and the key for Ohio State, I think, is if they're up, Northwestern can't just keep pounding the ball, and if you get up, you force more Clayton Thorson throws, and he will throw to the defense, even though Ohio State doesn't usually get interceptions. They did last week, but if Ohio State gets up, then you take Bowser out of the game, and once you make Northwestern one-dimensional, if they can do that, then I think it's game over.
Oh, I think at that point it's absolutely game over. Clayton Thorson is a 60% passer, which is, fine, but 6 yards per attempt, that's not anything special. And he's got 14 touchdowns and 12 interceptions this year. If you can put the game in his hands, I think Ohio State would take that 100 times out of 100 on Saturday. Next one. This is the question of the week from @BurnerAccount69. It's not even a question. I just want to be magnanimous and congratulate Jim Harbaugh on his first ever share of a conference division title. Cheers.
Cheers.
I don't even have anything to add to that. Next one from @AdaXVandahar. If OU wins within 7 and Ohio State wins by 14 plus, is that enough to jump them for the 4 spot?
Tom, you pretty much already addressed this. That it needs to be a significant difference, and 14 plus might need to be like 42 plus or 35 plus or 28 plus. It's going to have to be much different because right now they've made their decision on who is where, and Ohio State has to change their mind, and to change their mind, it has to be a bigger number.
Next one from @Craig_Henman. More likely to happen: Tate Martell throws a pass or Ohio State holding Northwestern under 20 points.
You go ahead.
I think they're both probably like in the 40-ish% range. I think they're actually pretty comparable. I guess I'll go with Ohio State holding Northwestern under 20 points because I guess that's probably more like a 50-50 thing to me. But I think there's a pretty good chance you're going to see. I mean, if you take Urban Meyer at his word, which, we can, as we have seen this year in various conversations about playing time, do that at your own peril. But if you take him at his word that they're going to play Martell again, I think they're going to have to throw with him some. You're going to have to give the defense something else to worry about there and not be so one-dimensional. So, and this is a big enough game that they're going to want to make sure they win. So if you're going to play him, you probably have to throw it some. So I guess I'll go with the holding Northwestern under 20 points, but I think it's probably pretty close between those two.
You almost talked yourself into the Tate Martell throwing the ball. You wanted to do it.
I mean, if you've ever listened to this podcast before, if there's one thing I can talk myself into, it's anything involving Tate Martell. So that's sort of our brand here. That's fine. How about you?
I believe Tate Martell will throw a pass, or is more likely to throw a pass than Ohio State holds Northwestern under 20. However, if Tate Martell plays defense, then I think Ohio State is more likely to hold Northwestern under 20.
At that point, I'll go one better. At that point, Ohio State's more likely to hold Northwestern under 0. Take that. Next one from @Kirk Gominger. Can this team cut down on the pass interference calls? No. Shouldn't the backup corners be given a shot by now? How does the team cut down on the yellow hankies? Since I answered the first one, you can take the next two.
Well, these are the best cornerbacks they have. Pat Fitzgerald said they're all NFL guys on the back end. And, they're generally there, or else they wouldn't be getting all of these flags, They just need to stop committing penalties. They're there. Like, it's not like they're 5 yards behind the guy and just getting torched all day long, like, Marlon Kerner back in the 1990s or whatever, or Vinnie Clark, they're there. Or else they wouldn't. I mean, they're running side by side a lot of the times. That's why people get mad that they don't look back. It's because they're right there. So the coverage is good. It's just they keep doing things that they are coached not to do. And I don't think you turn to Sevyn Banks or Tyreek Johnson, who are, some of the backups, or Marcus Williamson, or, that's it. I mean, those are the three guys you're talking about, unless you want to go Jeff Okudah and Sean Wade, and then maybe rotate in Damon Arnett or Kendall Sheffield. But right now, I think what they've got, this is as good as the secondary has been all year. Don't mess with it now.
Yeah, I don't think there's a better option there. I don't think. I do wonder on whether this is a personnel issue or a coaching issue, because it seems like they are talented enough, like you said, they can physically stay there. They're fast enough to stay there and be with the receivers, but then they do stuff they're not supposed to do. So is that just guys not trusting themselves and not doing what they're supposed to do, or is that not being coached in good technique? Like, I don't. It's been such a consistent problem. I don't quite know what to think, because you can kind of talk yourself into either one, and I think it's way too soon to judge Taver Johnson this year. It's his first season, and Kerry Combs gets lionized, but Kerry Combs had some pretty fantastic raw material to work with in the previous years. So I would like to see what it looks like next year, whether you have consistent problems with everyone, because if it's consistent problems with everyone, then it's a coaching issue. If it's just with certain guys, then that's more of a personnel issue. But I mean, this is like the why can't Ohio State throw the deep ball issues with JT Barrett. Is it because the wide receivers aren't well coached, or was it because of JT Barrett? And we never got an answer to that, because we changed, all of the variables changed during the same offseason. So I'd like to see what it looks like next year, with maybe some different guys in there. If maybe one of the guys goes pro, or just another year of coaching, see what those guys look like. Because sometimes at cornerback is just kind of a confidence position, and if you don't believe in yourself and you get worried and then you start getting grabby, then that's when the flag comes out. Next one, at Buckeye Tie 23, more likely that OSU and OU both make the college football playoff, or that neither make it?
Tom?
I'm going to say neither, because all it takes for neither to make it is Georgia beats Alabama, and then I think I would be floored if Georgia beats Alabama and the playoff field is something other than Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Notre Dame in some order. Like, I think that is almost preordained at this point, and you can have long, passionate conversations about whether that should be the playoff field at that point, but I don't think there's much question that that's what would be the playoff field at that point if Georgia beats Alabama. For Ohio State and Oklahoma both to make it, I mean, I don't know. Alabama smokes Georgia. Pitt somehow upsets Clemson, and both Oklahoma and Ohio State win by 50. Like, maybe at that point Clemson gets jumped out of the playoff, maybe. But I mean, I think of those two scenarios, I think that the first one, both of them being out, is the more likely one.
If Georgia blows out Alabama, say by like 4 touchdowns, Georgia goes to 1, Alabama to 4, boom, done. Everybody's happy. Or nobody is happy, I believe.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you've got that exactly opposite, but that's fine.
Per usual.
Next one from at Chip Minnick. Was Seven Banks playing on special teams all season, or was he redshirted? Which players in the 2018 class were redshirted besides Matthew Baldwin, Matthew Jones, and Cameron Babb? As far as I can recall, some played earlier in the season. And Gerd, I know you said you did the research on this one, so take it away.
Yeah, well, technically nobody has redshirted yet. You can't redshirt until after the season, so score 1 for me on that one. I like being the actually guy, because I'm not allowed to do it at home, So anytime I can do it out in the world, I try to do it just to be that guy. So Matthew Jones, the center, Cameron Babb, the wide receiver who's coming back from injury, Max Ray, the offensive lineman, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who, Tom, I don't know if you saw him a week or two ago doing some defense and some pass rush drills at the WAC. He is still super skinny, like super skinny. So that's why he's not played this year. They'll get him in the weight room this winter, and he won't be so skinny next year. Matthew Baldwin, obviously coming back, could play. There's been no opportunity. Although, just imagine if he could have played against Michigan.
Oh man, get the third string quarterback some work in your blowout win.
Naked boot on the final play, and then Alex Williams has not played. So those 6 guys have not played. They're definitely redshirting. Brian Sneed will redshirt. He's played 2 games. Who knows? I don't even know if he's back off the suspension or whatever it was that he was on. Nicholas Petit Frere has played in 3 games this year, so he's technically still redshirtable. Jalen Gill and Blue Smith have both played in 2 games. Blue Smith actually played against Michigan, and they're on one of those goal line packages. Tyreek Johnson, the corner, has played in 3 games, so he is still eligible for his red shirt. Sevyn Banks actually has played in 4, but I'm going to assume he's going to keep playing, so he won't redshirt. Malik Hooker has played in 3 games, and those are all have been in the second half of the season. We'll see what they decide to do with him. But everybody else has played multiple games. Many of them have played, like Chris Olave, 11 games, Jeremy Rucker, 11, Tyreek Smith, 12, Tommy Togiai, 11, Dallas Gant, 12, Taraji Mitchell, 10, and Kayvon Pope, the linebackers, he's played 12. So those guys are always on special teams. But, yeah, there's your definite red shirts and likely red shirts. I believe, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 guys from a class of 26. I didn't include Antoine Jackson in there because he is already redshirted. So the junior college transfer from Auburn who redshirted as a true freshman and then transferred out. So there's no redshirt for him. So that's the list.
And I think, I'm almost positive Marcus Hooker did not dress for the Michigan game. I think he was one of the players I was following off the field after the game. And I think he had a black hoodie on under a jersey. I don't think he had pads on. So I don't think Marcus Hooker was dressed. So he was probably, if I was going to guess, if he's only played in 3 games, I would guess if he wasn't dressed for Michigan, they're probably planning on redshirting. He may have some kind of an injury or something. And Max Ray, an offensive lineman, he was not dressed for a number of games earlier this year because of some sort of an injury. So in a lot of cases, it's an injury that just doesn't get reported just because we don't, that is the injury to the third team offensive tackle or third team safety is not something that necessarily gets brought up during the 15 minutes with Urban Meyer on Mondays. So that's why we don't necessarily know about specifics, but that's just something that plays into it. All right, last question from @BurnerAccount69, and this is so hurtful. How could the same person who had the great questions about congratulating Jim Harbaugh earlier ask something this hurtful? Given that Brown Thunder has jumped the shark and is no longer watchable, will you be DVRing Better Call Hoke?
For a guy who contributes to the show a lot in Burner Account 69, always has questions, this feels like a very personal attack. To say that Brown Thunder has jumped the shark when there is so much more potential for that show that we haven't even had to get to a point where we want Don Brown pulling a skier who is going to jump over a shark. We will get there. But as we've talked about the exit velocity, they'll getting his little legs moving. On our jump, the paddle boat will go up the ramp as well, I believe. And so we'll get there, but with our jump the shark, Tom, that's a good thing. It's only up from there.
Absolutely. And I mean, we know who the cast of the show is. There's only 2 people on the show. It's John O'Corn and Don Brown. So if Don Brown is driving the boat, John O'Corn has to be the one on water skis, which means he will successfully make it over the shark, but then land in the arms of Damon Webb. So it'll be, I think frankly, that's going to be one of the best rated episodes we've ever produced.
Right. We won't have, quote unquote, jump the shark until we add a redheaded nephew from out of state who comes in to move in with Don Brown and John O'Corn. And, he gets in all kinds of hijinks and he's kind of messy and everybody, he's got the floppy blonde hair, the red hair. And just, when he comes on and he, just oh, shucks, I'm just an innocent kid. Oh, did I start this fire? And so when we've included that kid, then you'll know we've run out of ideas and had to add something to it. But Tom, I don't see us running out of ideas for something that is unrun-outable of ideas. This is a guy on a paddle boat with another guy. It's endless.
And when we do reach the desperate point of having to introduce that character, we can call him Cousin Oliver Martin, because just keep it right on that Michigan roster. It's going to be great. I'm already excited to start writing that character in.
Oh, thank God for the offseason when we could get Brown Thunder started. And Tom, do you know who is attached to star in Brown Thunder?
I don't know, but I can't wait to find out.
Don Brown and John O'Corn.
Wow. I did not pick up my copy of the Hollywood Reporter this morning, so
big names. we talked to a lot of people who play Don Brown. Like we talked to Wilford Brimley. We talked to
he was unavailable due to death, but
we talked about him. We talked to his people. We didn't talk to him. We talked to Kirk Cameron,
Tom Selleck.
So pretty much all of the biggest names in Hollywood. But we decided after, some screen tests that there was nobody better to be Don Brown than Don Brown.
You gotta stay true to yourself, true to the character. I mean, you gotta do it right. Episode 1. So you gave up 62 points. It's gonna be great. I can't wait to produce it.
I can't wait either. So that's gonna do it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. Make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network. You know the rundown by now. Monday, it's a Sloopcast. Tuesday, it's Silver Bullets. Wednesday, it's Brown Thunder. Thursday, it's Sons of Schmidt. Friday, it is the Sloopcast again. This Saturday, it won't be Saturday. It'll be Sunday because it's going to be a late night. Sometimes Sunday morning, sometime, 4 o'clock in the morning, Sunday night. The Instant Reaction Show will pop up in your inbox or wherever you get your podcast. So we appreciate you all for listening. We always appreciate the feedback, the ratings, the reviews on iTunes, and subscribe. And you know what? Tell a coworker, tell a friend, tell an enemy. When you're telling your boss to cram it, also then say, also listen to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. So that way, like you're about to get fired, but then you just helped him or her. You've helped this person better their day. Like you told them off, and then you're like, but while I'm leaving, here's an excellent podcast for you. And you know what? You might get a raise. So, thank you all for listening. We will talk to you this weekend.
She threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say it well, now say it well. Oh yeah. Say it well, now say it well. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave.